Good morning. Welcome to the April 2026 open meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. As is our tradition, if you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Madam Secretary, would you please introduce today's agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and good morning, commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 6 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a report and order that would modernize spectrum sharing for satellite broadcasts. Second, you will consider a further notice of proposed rulemaking to combat robocalls through enhancing existing Know Your Customer or KYC requirements. Third, you will consider a second report and order on reconsideration, and second further notice of proposed rulemaking to ensure integrity and security in electronic device testing. Fourth, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that would protect against national security threats in domestic telecommunications service. Fifth, you will consider a report and order on reconsideration that would establish a new E-rate competitive bidding portal. Sixth, you will consider a third further notice of proposed rulemaking to amend the Audible crawl rule. This is your agenda for today. Today's first item is titled Modernizing Spectrum Sharing for Satellite Broadband and will be presented by the Space Bureau, and Jay Schwartz, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And before we proceed, just want to acknowledge we have some guests from BYU that I had a chance to visit with, a handful of students here watching at least our first item, and I think I have to move on to other things, but they are on their spring semester trip to D.C., so welcome to D.C., welcome to the FCC, great to have you here. And with that, Chief Schwartz, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. With me at the table from Space Bureau today is Jennifer Gilsnan, Sankar Prasad, and to present the item, Clay DeSell.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. The Space Bureau presents to you a report and order which would modernize the Commission's spectrum sharing rules for geostationary and non-geostationary satellite systems in workhorse frequency bands for satellite broadband. Already, millions of Americans rely on high-speed, low-latency connections from the thousands of satellites deployed and operating in low Earth orbit. Yet key spectrum sharing rules, dating from the 1990s, require these innovative new systems to meet equivalent power flux density limits that effectively overprotect geostationary networks and limit services from non-geostationary systems. This order would replace these legacy limits with modern, performance-based protection criteria reflecting decades of technological innovation and operational experience. Specifically, the order would adopt backstop protection criteria incorporating a degraded throughput methodology for systems operating in the 10.7 to 12.7 gigahertz, 17.3 to 18.6 gigahertz, and 19.7 to 20.2 gigahertz bands. This backstop would ensure compatibility between geostationary and non-geostationary systems when coordination has not yet been reached. At the same time, the order would encourage private agreements by extending the Commission's good faith coordination requirements. While highly technical, these rule changes are expected to have real-world impacts, including up to 8-fold increases in satellite broadband capacity available in a given area and total economic benefits in the billions of dollars. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. Today, we decided to update the framework GSOs and NGSOs use to share spectrum. The United States supported modernizing this framework in the last World Radio Communication Conference, and while the conversation continues to unfold today in international fora, we move forward. Since our decision represents a significant change within our borders, I am pleased to see that the new framework is anchored in the principle of good faith negotiation. Under this framework, NGSO and GSO satellite systems are expected to share relevant technical information and coordinate. In exchange for flexibility, we are expecting good faith negotiation. Good faith negotiation is not optional. It is a fundamental principle that drives the sharing framework we adopt today, and we take it seriously. We want to see this updated framework result in successful coordination that supports satellite spectrum sharing and benefits consumers. So thank you to the Office of the Chairman for incorporating my feedback on this item, and thank you to the Space Bureau for your hard work on this report and order.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now hear comments from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. Nearly 30 years ago, global satellite policymakers endorsed equivalent power flux density, or EPFD, limits in the KU and KA spectrum bands. These limits reflected a precautionary approach to protecting GSO satellites from harmful interference, while still enabling spectrum sharing between non-geostationary fixed satellite systems and incumbent geostationary operators. Yet notwithstanding the utility of the EPFD framework, few could have anticipated the scale and dynamism of the satellite ecosystem 3 decades following its adoption. Today, geostationary operators have deployed satellites with enhanced capabilities that support reliable internet connectivity, high-capacity video and audio distribution, and mission-critical communication services for our military. Meanwhile, the NGSO sector has experienced explosive growth, with commercial providers launching constellations of hundreds to thousands of satellites in low Earth orbit. These systems deliver high-speed, low-latency broadband, enable direct-to-device communication services, and more. Together, GSO and NGSO operators are expanding connectivity across the nation and making meaningful progress in our mission to close the digital divide. Importantly, technological advances now allow NGSO systems to use shared spectrum far more efficiently and to mitigate interference in ways that were not possible when EPFD limits were first implemented. In light of these developments, it's clear that legacy rules, however well-intentioned, are a constraint to competition, innovation, and American leadership in the space economy. Today, we begin to correct course. The President's 2025 Executive Order on ensuring American space superiority underscores the importance of U.S. leadership in spectrum policy and calls on policymakers to enable commercial space growth through more efficient spectrum management. This rulemaking advances that goal. It follows the general approach that the Commission has already taken for NGSO and GSO sharing, and the ITU has adopted in the Q and V bands for GSO and GSO sharing. And it promotes more effective spectrum sharing by moving beyond rigid EPFD limits in the KU and KA downlink bands and toward a framework grounded in good faith coordination, coupled with clear short and long-term protection criteria. This approach better balances the need for NGSO systems to expand capacity with appropriate safeguards for ongoing GSO operations. Just as important, today's decision positions the United States to lead globally in modernizing satellite spectrum policy. For years, the United States has recognized the need to revisit international EPFD rules that limit the ability of American companies to improve performance, reduce costs, and deliver better services worldwide. I appreciate the Chairman's collaboration in advancing language that positions the United States as a leader in future international discussions on EPFD limits. I'm optimistic that today's action and the real-world results it enables will strengthen our hand at advancing global spectrum harmonization through the ITU process. I thank the Space Bureau for their very hard work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. This one is a big deal. So Americans today are benefiting from increased competition for their broadband dollars. We see wireless carriers now competing against cable companies for in-home subscribers. We see cable companies now competing against traditionally wireless companies for mobile subscribers. And increasingly, satellite is competing with them all. Today's FCC decision will help supercharge that competition while expanding our country's technological leadership. Even though high-speed, next-gen satellite services provide essential connectivity across the country already, Americans are now about to see a big upgrade. With today's decision, consumers could see a 7-fold increase in capacity for these high-speed satellite offerings. See, the Commission has had some technical restrictions on these low Earth orbit satellites dating all the way back to the 1990s. But those decades-old rules no longer reflect today's offerings. In fact, they're holding them back. Modern satellite designs make it far easier to share spectrum than what yesterday's regulations assume. We can do a lot better. Today, low Earth orbit satellite providers are scaling at a rapid pace. Once dismissed as a niche offering, satellite broadband is a real and growing competitor in the connectivity marketplace. That should inform how we approach power levels on satellite broadband. Are our rules keeping up with the new reality? Are they holding it back? For years, our framework relied on legacy constructs like EPFD. Those rules were designed for a different generation of satellite systems. That's not the world we live in anymore. Today's systems move differently, they scale differently, they compete differently, so our rules should keep pace. Updating our approach, moving beyond outdated EPFD limits and toward more modern interference protections also promotes competition. It allows satellite providers to operate with greater parity alongside terrestrial broadband offerings. One way to think about it is where you might have had one connection to a satellite before, you could have connections to 7 or more satellites at a time. The benefits we felt most by the Americans who need it the most. Rural communities, hard to reach areas, places where the business case for traditional deployment remains challenging. For those Americans, high-speed satellite isn't theoretical, it's tangible, it's available now, and it's improving rapidly. This is also about American leadership. U.S. companies are leading the world in next-gen satellite services. We should have a regulatory framework that matches that energy, not one that slows it down. We're not going to leave Americans stuck and waiting on the wrong side of the digital divide while other countries debate whether or not they want these same types of next-gen services operating in their parts of the world. We're going to act now in the interests of the American people. So for their excellent work on this item, I want to thank the Space Bureau. This was something that we had on our radar for quite a long time, and it's going to be a good win. So thanks to Clay DeSalle, Jennifer Gilsonen, Stephanie Neville, Sankar Prasad, Chief Schwartz. Thanks as well to Mohammed Ahmad, Patrick Sun, Alex Yankelevich from the Office of Economics and Analytics. With that, we'll proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trusty?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Combating Robocalls Through Enhanced Know Your Customer Requirements and will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Edward Bartolome, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Thanks, Madam Secretary. When you're ready, Chief, please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Today, I am pleased to introduce, on behalf of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, an item that, if adopted, would seek comment on enhancing the existing Know Your Customer requirement in order to make it more difficult for scammers and other bad actors to flood our communications networks with illegal calls. Before turning the presentation over to my colleague, I would like to thank the Wireline Competition, Wireless Telecommunications, Enforcement, and Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureaus, as well as the Offices of Economics and Analytics, Communications Business Opportunities, and the General Counsel for their valuable assistance. Joining me today at the table is Wes Platt, Chief of CGB's Consumer Policy Division, who will present the item.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Combating illegal calls is the Commission's top consumer priority. And we're taking a holistic approach by attacking these at every point in their life cycle. The most effective way to prevent such calls from reaching consumers is to stop them before they ever reach the network. Originating voice service providers are best positioned to do this by screening customers before they make calls. If adopted, this further notice of proposed rulemaking would strengthen our Know Your Customer requirement by clarifying the rigorous steps providers must take to protect consumers. Specifically, the further notice would first seek comment on requiring providers to obtain identification information from new and renewing customers, including name, physical address, government-issued ID number, and an alternate telephone number. Second, seek comment on requiring providers to take specific steps to verify, retain, and re-verify customer information. For customers seeking high-volume calling services, we ask whether providers must review additional documentation such as corporate records, proof of good standing, third-party address records, and evidence of commercial presence. Third, propose to codify a base forfeiture amount for violations of the Know Your Customer rule on a per-call basis to ensure penalties assessed better match the harm caused by any one caller. Finally, the further notice would seek comment on whether Know Your Customer requirements can deter criminal misuse of communications networks and enhance national security by preventing bad actors from using illegal calls for denial of service attacks on government officials and sensitive infrastructure, including emergency services. The Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
I've said this before, and unfortunately, it remains true. Unwanted robocalls are the main consumer complaint that we receive. Even though the horrors of robocalls persist, we keep trying to find a way to end them. Today, we ask broad questions about how to improve the Know Your Customer rule, which requires carriers to get to know their customers in an effort to prevent bad actors from abusing their network to inflict unwanted robocalls on consumers. So I look forward to seeing the record develop and hearing from stakeholders about how to improve this important rule. And I'd like to thank the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau for your continued and diverse efforts to address robocalls.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now hear from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. Protecting consumers from scams is essential to safeguarding the communications networks that underpin our economic vitality and national security. Robust Know Your Customer practices are a critical component to that effort. At their most effective, these measures can prevent bad actors from accessing communications networks in the first place. They also can equip law enforcement with the information needed to identify and pursue those scammers and other criminals who do manage to gain access. Although the FCC has maintained Know Your Customer requirements for several years, experience suggests that further refinement may be warranted. Provider flexibility remains important as well. However, greater clarity regarding the scope and application of these obligations could better serve both consumers and providers. As we evaluate the record in this proceeding, I look forward to considering how enhanced Know Your Customer requirements fit together with tools such as improved caller ID authentication to more effectively combat illegal robocalls. Consumers deserve nothing less. I thank the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau for their hard work on this important item. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Combating the scourge of illegal robocalls remains the FCC's top consumer protection priority. And since I became chairman, we've been changing our tactics a little bit. We're now tackling the problem at every single point in the life cycle of a call. Today's item focuses on improving measures that originating providers take before a call even starts. As we've continued to investigate the problem of illegal robocalls, it's become clear that some originating providers are not doing enough to vet their customers, allowing bad actors to get onto the U.S. telephone network. Even though originating providers are subject to existing Know Your Customer obligations, where they're supposed to take affirmative and effective measures to know their customer, some do the bare minimum or worse and have become complicit in illegal robocalling schemes. This item would close the gaps that exist in originating providers' current practices and KYC obligations and ensure that they can't turn a blind eye while U.S. phone networks are exploited and Americans are defrauded. Today's item also bolsters our KYC enforcement by proposing pre-call, per-call penalties. By tying fines directly to the harms caused, we're also helping to incentivize even better vetting by originating providers. So for all their great work on this item, I'd like to thank the Bureau and the entire cross-agency team that we get together with to work on robocalls. but in particular here on this item, thanks to Zach Champ, Wes Platt, Richard Smith, Mark Stone, Chief Bartholomew, Richard Mallon, Derek Yo, Jessica Kinsey, Dan Stepanich, and Chris Laughlin for their great work on the item. With that, we'll proceed to a vote, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trustee?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Moving through at a good clip here, Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 3 on your agenda is titled Promoting the Integrity and Security of Telecommunications Certification Bodies, Measurement Facilities, and the Equipment Authorization Program, and will be presented by the Office of Engineering and Technology, and Andy Hendrickson, Chief of the Office, will give the introduction.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. I am pleased to introduce the second report and order on reconsideration and second further notice of proposed rulemaking that will strengthen the integrity of our equipment authorization program by addressing national security risks and revising our equipment authorization rules to encourage reciprocity in testing and certification. Joining me at the table is Catherine Patsis-Nevitt, Senior Attorney Advisor in the Office of Engineering and Technology, and Erica Heron-Moon, Policy Intern in the Office of Engineering and Technology. Catherine, all yours.
Thank you, Eddie. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. The second report and order on reconsideration, and second further notice of proposed rulemaking in the promoting the integrity and security of telecommunications certification bodies, measurement facilities, and the equipment authorization program proceeding presented for your consideration today would continue the Commission's work to strengthen the integrity, security, and credibility of our equipment authorization program. If adopted, the second report and order would establish a fast-track priority review for equipment authorization applications subject to the pre-approval guidance process when testing is conducted by trusted test labs. These labs include facilities located in the United States or in countries with a mutual recognition agreement or comparable reciprocal agreement. This action would strengthen the integrity of the equipment authorization program by accelerating the expansion of testing capacity in the United States and in reciprocal economies that do not present national security concerns. Second, the item would require telecommunication certification bodies and test labs to disclose the number and geographic location of all employees involved in FCC-recognized testing and certification. This information is essential to assess impartiality and identify foreign jurisdictional influence. Third, the item would update post-market surveillance procedures to improve oversight and help ensure that devices in the marketplace are consistent with those tested in the lab. Fourth, the item would strengthen enforcement mechanisms to deter violations, including false certifications and fraudulent test results, and reinforce the Commission's ability to hold manufacturers, TCBs, and test labs accountable for misconduct. Fifth, it would establish confidential reporting channels to enable industry participants to raise compliance concerns or national security risks without fear of retaliation. Last, the second report and order would direct OET to develop a consolidated machine-readable list of prohibited entities. This will streamline the screening process for TCBs and reduce the administrative burden associated with reviewing multiple federal lists. The order on reconsideration would grant Garmin International's petition for reconsideration and revise foreign ownership reporting timelines for publicly traded companies to align with SEC reporting schedules. The second further notice of proposed rulemaking would seek comment on whether to prohibit recognition of test labs, TCBs, and accreditation bodies located in countries without an MRA or reciprocal agreement. Comment is also sought on the appropriate transition periods, phased approaches, fee-based interim procedures to support industry adjustments, and any intellectual property protections that should apply during testing and certification. Finally, the notice would seek comment on modernizing data analytics and the equipment authorization system to strengthen oversight, detect evasion, and streamline processes.
The Office of Engineering and Technology recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges to make technical or conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you all for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Last year, we adopted rules to prevent bad actors from utilizing TCBs, test labs, and laboratory accreditation bodies as a backdoor to the FCC's equipment authorization program. Back then, we focused on preventing prohibited entities like the ones on the covered list to access our program and to jeopardize national security. Today, we focus on encouraging reliance on trusted labs. Our efforts are aimed at strengthening the integrity of our equipment authorization process and thus strengthening the trustworthiness of wireless devices that reach consumers. So thank you to the Office of Engineering and Technology for incorporating my office's feedback and for your hard work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now hear from Commissioner Trustee.
Thank you. When Americans think about national security, they often picture our military, warfighters parachuting from helicopters, intelligence agencies engaged in covert espionage operations, or perhaps the latest spy thriller. What rarely comes to mind is the Made In label on RF devices in their homes, or the reality that the life cycle of those devices, including where they are tested for FCC certification, can have profound implications for the security and privacy of both consumers and their neighbors. The Commission has rightly made strengthening the equipment authorization process a cornerstone of its national security efforts, including by promoting greater security and accountability in device testing. To date, the Bad Labs proceeding has delivered meaningful national security benefits, including the removal of 23 test labs found to be controlled by foreign adversaries. Today's item builds on that progress. It creates a clear pathway for equipment testing to occur in labs located in the United States or in countries with which we maintain trusted trade relationships that allow us to rely on their testing and certification regimes. In particular, the item reduces regulatory barriers for devices tested in these trusted test labs and proposes durable safeguards by severing ties with untrustworthy test labs, TCBs, and accreditation bodies. I also welcome this item's efforts to increase transparency in testing labs and TCBs, strengthen enforcement mechanisms, and streamline applicant screening. Strengthening the integrity of our communications ecosystem is a national security imperative, and this item advances that goal in a meaningful way. I thank the Office of Engineering and Technology for their thoughtful work on this item, as well as our interagency partners for their collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Last month marked 1 year since we established the FCC's Council on National Security. Over this year, we have made national security a top priority. As foreign adversaries relentlessly target American communications networks, the FCC has a vital role to play in securing those networks. From our effort to stop the online sale of unauthorized devices known as Operation Clean Carts, to the covered list, to undersea cable rulemakings, we're doing our part to secure America's telecom infrastructure and reduce our supply chain dependencies on foreign adversaries. I'm especially grateful that my fellow commissioners here have provided strong leadership and ideas on the national security agenda and docket that we're running. One of the biggest national security wins from the past year was our Bad Labs decision. It was based on a simple premise. We should not have foreign adversary governments or other entities on America's sanctions lists testing and certifying electronic devices as safe for the U.S. market. As a result, the FCC has taken action to withdraw recognition from or to otherwise deny 23 bad labs controlled by foreign adversary governments. With foreign adversary governments excluded, the FCC now takes the next step to restore reciprocity to the FCC's equipment authorization program. For decades, the FCC limited testing to labs in the U.S. or in foreign countries that have mutual recognition agreements, MRAs, with the U.S., wherein each country would recognize the other country's test labs. Makes sense? But in 2015, the FCC changed course, leading to more than 75% of testing occurring in countries that refuse any reciprocal agreement or arrangement with the U.S. Today's rules and FNPRM brings reciprocity back to the process. We propose to stop recognizing any lab in a country without a reciprocal agreement with the U.S. If a country wants the FCC to recognize its test labs, the country should sign an MRA or similar agreement with the U.S. This will not only ensure reciprocal international commercial relations, but it will ensure that the FCC has sufficient oversight, monitoring, and enforcement authority to guarantee the integrity of the equipment authorization process. It will also hopefully onshore testing capacity that has been offshored for decades. So for their great work on the item, I want to thank the whole team that was working on it, but thanks in particular to Catherine Patsis-Nevitt, Erica Heron-Moon, Alice Jew, Chief Hendrickson, Dusamantha Tennakoon, Thomas Rigalage, Brandon Moss, Alex Yankelevich, Sherry Lee, Siobhan Philemon. You guys are really trying to step me up with these names here, trip me up. Doug Klein, Deborah Brodesen, and obviously thanks again as well to our intern. We are going to have a great spate of interns coming in here soon for the whole summer, but it's good that you got a head start on that. So thanks for all the work on this, and with that, we'll now proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trusty?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 4 on your agenda is titled Protecting Against National Security Threats in Domestic Telecommunications Service and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Joseph Calichon, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Thanks, Chief. When you're ready, please
Good
proceed.
morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a notice of proposed rulemaking that, if adopted, will continue the Commission's efforts to protect the nation's telecommunications networks by proposing to exclude entities on the covered list from providing domestic interstate telecommunication services. I'd like to thank the entire Bureau team for their hard work on this item, as well as our colleagues throughout the Commission. With me at the table today are Jody Griffin, Deputy Bureau Chief, Jody May, we've got both Jodys, Chief of the Bureau's Competition Policy Division, and Robert Martin, Attorney Advisor in the division, who will now present the item.
Thank you, Joseph, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Pursuant to the Secure and Trusted Communication Network Act, the Commission publishes and maintains a covered list of communications equipment and services that are deemed to pose an unacceptable national security risk, based on recommendations of the executive branch national security agencies. If adopted, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking would propose to amend Section 63.01 of the Commission's rules to exclude on a prospective basis any entities identified on the covered list from being authorized to provide interstate telecommunications services pursuant to a blanket domestic authority under Section 214. If adopted, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking would also seek comment on other potential exclusions from blanket authority under Section 214 and other related measures, including whether the Commission should expand the exclusion to other entities whose provision of domestic 214 services could threaten national security, such as those ties to foreign adversaries. In addition, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking would tentatively conclude that national security concerns exist with regard to telecommunications. Finally, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, if adopted, would seek comment on whether the Commission should take any additional measures with regard to entities holding authorizations from the Commission to protect U.S. telecommunications networks. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Today's item advances our efforts to ensure the agency's processes reflect current national security realities. That was a word.
It happens.
The Commission should always be deliberate and thoughtful about examining potential national security threats before granting approvals or authorizations. By proposing to exclude covered list entities from the blanket domestic 214 authorization process, we do just that. So thank you to the chairman for working with me on edits, and thank you to the Wireline Competition Bureau for your work on this item.
Thanks. We'll now hear from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. The nature and scope of physical and cybersecurity threats facing our communications networks today exceed those of any recent era. In response to these growing hostilities, it's imperative that we re-examine policies that permit access to U.S. networks to ensure that frameworks originally designed to promote economic growth are not exploited in ways that jeopardize our national and economic security. Striking the right balance requires the Commission to focus its oversight where risks are greatest. This notice of proposed rulemaking advances that objective by exploring how the Commission can build on national security determinations made by our federal partners and incorporate them into a more tailored, risk-based approach to upfront review. I appreciate the chairman working with me to ensure the notice considers these issues not only in the case of entry authority for common carriers, but also in the case of companies seeking to provide unlicensed wireless service. In doing so, we continue recent efforts to direct heightened regulatory attention to entities with ownership or control ties to foreign adversaries. At the same time, we recognize the substantial benefits of a regulatory framework that fosters competition and innovation in the communications marketplace. The record developed in this proceeding will help ensure that we preserve those benefits to the fullest extent possible while taking prudent, targeted steps to safeguard public safety and national security. I thank the Wireline Competition Bureau for their great work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. Under multiple presidents and through multiple FCC chairs, this agency has worked to counter the threats that foreign adversaries pose to our networks. From 2019 through 2023, the FCC denied or revoked the International Telecom Authority of 5 separate entities, all controlled by foreign adversaries, and added their provision of services to the covered list. These actions followed findings that their services pose unacceptable national security risks. Nonetheless, many of these entities and others identified on the agency's covered list continue to operate or potentially operate in the U.S. by providing services that don't fall under the legal definition of International Telecommunications Authority. For years, I've referred to this evasion as an end run around our covered list restrictions. In fact, the very first action the FCC's Council on National Security took was to launch an investigation into covered list entities' continued operations in the U.S. Today's NPRM opens a comment period on a range of different measures we could take to close those loopholes. Starting from the least controversial, we've proposed that covered list entities no longer be granted blanket authority to provide domestic telecom services. At the very least, they should have to apply to provide such services. We also seek comment on a range of other potential measures the Commission can take to secure our networks from these bad actors, including limiting their authority to interconnect with others. On all of this effort today, I'd like to thank especially my colleagues and Commissioner Trusty for her strong continued leadership on national security matters and her really helpful edits that seek comment on potentially limiting covered list ability to offer and operate other RF devices more broadly. We're going to be taking a look at that, so thanks for leadership on that. And Commissioner Trusty has also been pushing hard for the interests of the U.S. and a lot of international bodies that she's been very active in as well. So thanks for all that, and thanks as well to the team for all of your great work. I'd like to thank in particular Chief Calashone, Jody Griffin, Jody May, Melissa Kirkle, Robert Martin, Doug Klein, Deborah Broderson. Thank you all for your work. And with that, we'll proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trusty?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. And Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 5 on your agenda is titled Establishing a New E-Rate Competitive Bidding Portal and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Once again, Joseph Calashone, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
When the rest of your swapped out team is ready, please
Still
proceed.
here. Yep. So the Bureau is now pleased to present for your consideration a report and order on reconsideration that, if adopted, would make changes to the competitive bidding processes for the E-rate program. It would strengthen program integrity, assist E-rate applicants with program compliance, prevent improper payments, and decrease the risk of waste, fraud, and abuse. I'd like to thank the Bureau team and our colleagues throughout the Commission for their hard work on this item. Seated at the table with me are Allison Baker, Associate Bureau Chief, Brian Boyle, Chief of the Bureau's Telecommunications Access Policy Division, John A. Schreiber, Deputy Chief in the division, and Jennifer Mensa, Attorney Advisor in the division, who will now present the item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Today's report and order would create and implement a competitive bidding portal managed by the Universal Service Administrative Company, known as USAC, under the direction and supervision of the Wireline Competition Bureau and the Office of Managing Director. The Commission's Office of the Inspector General recommended creation of the portal, with support from the Government Accountability Office and the U.S. Department of Justice. Specifically, the report and order, if adopted, would require 1, prospective service providers to submit through USAC through a USAC-managed bidding portal rather than directly to applicants, and 2, applicants to upload bid evaluation and vendor selection documentation to the portal after selecting their service providers. Additionally, the rules, if adopted, would generally prohibit communications outside of the portal during the open competitive bidding period with few exceptions. In addition, today's report and order, if adopted, includes changes to simplify and streamline the E-rate program for applicants and service providers. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Today, the Commission is taking steps to improve and strengthen the E-rate program, one of the most consequential tools this agency has to close the digital divide and to ensure that every student and library patron has access to the connectivity they need to learn, to work, and to participate in our economy. E-rate works. It has connected hundreds of thousands of schools and libraries across the country. The program has a strong track record, and that deserves to be said plainly. The FCC's own managing director recently reported to the Inspector General that E-rate's improper payment error rate dropped from 1.59% to 1.27% in fiscal year 2024, falling below the statutory threshold of 1.5%, and that the program is no longer considered susceptible to a significant risk of improper payments. A GAO report from late last year found that the E-rate was the only federal program among those it reviewed to have documented procedures for all 9 of the GAO's leading practices for fraud prevention and program oversight. That is a program that works and that is worth protecting. Protecting the integrity and success of this program means being thoughtful and proactive about the systems we put in place to keep it running well. The competitive bidding portal this order establishes, while not perfect, is best understood in that spirit. The FCC's Inspector General identified a reliance on self-certification as a structural vulnerability, not because E-rate is riddled with problems, but because any program of this scale and importance deserves oversight tools that match it. This order provides stronger oversight, but it goes far beyond the IG's recommendations, which merely called for the creation of a simple bid repository. This order also includes a number of administrative improvements that reduce the burden on applicants, and I am glad to support those. It also reflects engagement with the serious concerns raised by E-rate advocates, who came to our office with well-grounded questions about whether the portal could be built and implemented in a way that works for the communities this program is designed to serve. I'm glad that some, although not all, of those concerns are reflected in the final order, including clearer guidance on how the federal portal will work alongside existing state procurement processes and commitments around training, testing, and stakeholder feedback before the portal is fully implemented and required. I expect those commitments to be fulfilled on a timeline that genuinely helps applicants prepare. That said, I will be watching implementation closely, and I want to be direct about what I will be looking for. The communities most at risk of being burdened by a more complex filing process are the same ones that E-rate was built to reach: small rural libraries, schools in tribal communities, underfunded districts without dedicated E-rate staff or the budget to hire consultants. Those advocating for measured restraint made a compelling case, backed by history, that new USAC system builds have not always gone smoothly, and that the consequences of a rocky rollout fall hardest on the smallest and most under-resourced participants. We cannot let this process undermine a program that is working. If implementation of the portal creates barriers that make it harder for schools and libraries to connect students and library patrons, those issues must be taken up promptly by this commission. I expect the Bureau to report on implementation progress, and I expect that if problems emerge, we will act on them. E-rate is one of this agency's great success stories. It works because the rules are sound, the process is fair, and the program reaches communities that need it the most. We must keep it that way. For these reasons, I will vote to approve this item in part and dissent in part. The improvements reflected here are important, and I am glad to support them. But given the implementation challenges that lie ahead, the fact that this bidding portal goes beyond the recommendations from the Inspector General, and my continuing concerns about whether the structure and implementation timeline of the portal will work for the schools and libraries that depend on this program most, I cannot offer my full support today. I look forward to watching implementation closely and to continuing to work together. I want to thank the chairman for working with my office on changes and the Wireline Competition Bureau for their work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now hear comments from Commissioner Trustee.
Thank you. Universal connectivity is a foundational principle of the Communications Act and the cornerstone of our mission. Federal communications law rightly underscores the particular importance of ensuring reliable connectivity for schools and libraries. In my travels, I've seen firsthand how critical these connections are, especially in remote communities like Bethel and Eek, Alaska. The E-rate program plays a vital role in advancing this objective. Therefore, sound program administration requires not only strong safeguards, but also a commitment to reducing unnecessary regulatory burdens and streamlining processes that have outlived their usefulness. I'm pleased this item takes meaningful steps to update the E-rate program with those goals in mind. At the same time, the Commission must remain a vigilant steward of universal service funds by guarding against waste, fraud, and abuse. The FCC has made significant progress on that front. In 2017, the Government Accountability Office identified the need for improvements to E-rate program integrity following elevated levels of improper payments between 2014 through 2019. The Commission responded with reforms, and a December 2025 GAO report found that the E-rate program had adopted key practices and procedures designed to mitigate funding program risks. As program participants themselves recognize, that progress does not mark the end of our responsibility. Rather, it underscores the importance of carefully weighing whether new requirements will deliver benefits that justify their costs, not only the costs for E-rate participants, but also for the contributors who ultimately fund new program integrity measures. In this instance, I'm persuaded that the item seeks to strike an appropriate balance with respect to the creation of a new competitive bidding portal. As the item notes, several state and local governments have implemented similar systems to advance their own procurement objectives. Drawing on those experiences, this portal is designed to reflect the specific oversight needs of the E-rate program while promoting greater transparency and consistency in federal oversight of the bidding process. The details of implementation and enforcement will be critical to the portal's success. The item establishes a framework to incorporate stakeholder input into the design and operation of the system before it becomes mandatory. It also provides flexibility for subsequent clarifications and adjustments based on real-world experience. The benefit of stakeholder input also is reflected in the clarifications provided in this order, which should help facilitate compliance. Importantly, this item should not result in a gotcha approach to enforcement against program participants acting in good faith to comply during the portal's rollout. It makes clear that the Bureau must account for a reasonable learning curve when evaluating waiver requests, particularly for procedural or administrative errors by smaller or more rural participants. On balance, I am persuaded that this item remains mindful about the need to ensure program integrity while avoiding unnecessary burdens. I thank the Wireline Competition Bureau for their thoughtful work on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. The FCC's E-rate program has played an important role in helping to close the digital divide by ensuring that schools and libraries have access to affordable internet services. To ensure the program's continued success, we must be good stewards of these taxpayer dollars and safeguard E-rate from waste, fraud, and abuse. That's why today's item is another common sense step forward. Going back to 2017, the FCC's Office of Inspector General urged the agency to create an online competitive bid repository that would require providers to disclose their bids in an open, transparent manner. The idea is straightforward. A bidding portal that facilitates open and transparent engagement will help deter bad actors from engaging in misconduct during the bidding process. The Inspector General has continued to reiterate this recommendation in subsequent reports over the years. And the FCC's Inspector General is not alone. In 2020, the Government Accountability Office released a report finding that E-rate participants could misrepresent compliance with competitive bidding rules since there was no direct access to the underlying bidding information. GAO specifically referenced the Inspector General's recommendation for a bidding repository, agreeing that a portal could strengthen program controls. So today we act on those warnings in the Inspector General's recommendations. We do so by bringing much-needed transparency to the E-rate bidding process. Instead of continuing to rely just on self-certifications, we can rely on verifiable data. And instead of allowing the bidding process to largely happen in the dark, we're bringing light to the back and forth engagement that happens between providers, participants, and other stakeholders. This in turn will allow the FCC and USAC to ensure that USF funds are supporting services being provided at the lowest possible rates. But this step shouldn't be and probably will not be our last. There's much more work to be done to protect the integrity of the E-rate program and ensure that it's carried out as envisioned by Congress. I do want to thank my colleagues for their engagement on this issue, including Commissioner Gomez. I know we weren't able to get there at the end of the day, but I appreciate the good faith back and forth and work by her and her team on this item. For their great work on the item, I do want to thank the staff team as well. I'd like to thank Chief Calashone, Allison Baker, Brian Boyle, Johnny Schreiber, Kate Dumichel, Gabriella Gross, Veronica Garcia Uloa, Jennifer Mensa, Dan Daly, and Dewana Terry. Thank you all for your work. And with that, we will now proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve in part and dissent in part.
Commissioner Trustee?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, item 6 on your agenda is titled Amending the Audible Crawl Rule and will be presented by the Media Bureau. Deputy Bureau Chief Hillary DeNegro will give the introduction.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Media Bureau presents a third further notice of proposed rulemaking that proposes to revise the Audible Crawl Rule. The rule requires video programming providers to make visual, non-textual emergency information provided during non-newscast programming audibly accessible. This action takes a common-sense approach to a regulation that doesn't work as enacted. Joining me at the table this morning are Maria Malarkey and Diana Sokolow and Virginia Ingram of the Policy Division of the Media Bureau. Virgie will present the item.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I am pleased to present this third further notice of proposed rulemaking, proposing to revise the Audible Crawl Rule to eliminate requirements that are not technically feasible with regard to visual, non-textual emergency information. The Audible Crawl Rule requires video programming providers and distributors to provide an oral representation of visual, non-textual emergency information shown during non-newscast video programming such as radar maps or other graphics on a secondary audio stream, so that such information is accessible to people who are blind or visually impaired. The compliance deadline for the Audible Crawl Rule was May 26, 2015, but the Bureau has granted 7 successive waiver requests, which have covered the entirety of the nearly 11 years that compliance with the rule has been required. The waivers have been needed because despite industry efforts to create an automated system for orally describing visual but non-textual emergency information, there is no viable technical compliance solution. and if stations are forced to utilize manual compliance solutions, many of them will forego the use of visual, non-textual emergency information. The third further notice will conclude that the record supports initiation of a rulemaking proceeding to seek comment on amending the Audible Crawl Rule, consistent with the petition for rulemaking filed by the National Association of Broadcasters. The item will propose to amend the Audible Crawl Rule to specify that compliance is met if a textual crawl provides emergency information duplicative of or equivalent to the non-textual emergency information, so long as the textual crawl is also conveyed orally. It also seeks comment on whether the Commission should codify any best practices in implementing this proposed provision. The third further notice tentatively concludes that a technical solution to comply with the current Audible Crawl Rule is not currently possible. It also tentatively concludes that the proposed modification is likely to have multiple benefits, including ensuring that video programming distributors and providers continue to provide visual but non-textual emergency information during non-newscast programming, and enhancing government efficiency and regulatory certainty by eliminating the need for successive waivers. The Media Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt this third further notice of proposed rulemaking and requests editorial privileges to make any necessary technical or conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
So today we consider a notice of proposed rulemaking aimed at resolving a long-standing challenge in our emergency accessibility rules. And that's ensuring that individuals who are blind or visually impaired receive timely and accurate information when emergency graphics appear on screen. Congress directed the Commission through the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act to make televised emergency information accessible to all audiences. And in 2013, the Commission adopted rules requiring that emergency information presented visually also be provided audibly through the secondary audio stream. This requirement applies not only to text crawls, but also to radar images, maps, and other non-textual visual graphics. Despite extensive efforts over many years, no automated real-time method yet exists to describe these graphics accurately. Consequently, the Commission has issued a series of waivers while the search for a solution continued. So the draft before us acknowledges this reality. It tentatively concludes that a technical means of generating reliable audio descriptions of non-textual graphics is not available and is unlikely to emerge in the near term. And to address this gap, the proposal adopts a practical approach. This approach reflects current practice at most stations and ensures that individuals who rely on audio remain fully informed without imposing burdens that could inadvertently discourage broadcasters from using valuable visual graphics. The draft also asks whether the agency should encourage continued exploration of emerging technologies, including potential future applications of artificial intelligence that may one day make real-time audio descriptions of graphics feasible. Ultimately, this proposal aims to enhance accessibility, provide regulatory clarity, and ensure the continued availability of visual emergency graphics. So I look forward to reviewing the record that develops and to working collaboratively towards a durable and effective solution. And I want to thank the Media Bureau staff for their good work over many years on this issue as well as on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now hear from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. The FCC's mission is to ensure that all Americans benefit from communication services, especially when public safety is at stake. But even well-intentioned rules must work in practice. After more than a decade of waivers, it's appropriate to revisit the Audible Crawl Rule and assess how it has functioned in the real world. Re-examining this rule does not mean retreating from our commitment to accessibility. Rather, it reflects an effort to build on years of industry experience and stakeholder collaboration to ensure that individuals who are blind or visually impaired receive critical emergency information through effective and reliable means. I look forward to working with Commission staff, broadcasters, and other stakeholders to ensure our rules are both practical and continue to expand access to emergency information for all Americans. I thank the Media Bureau for its good work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. When the FCC adopted the Audible Crawl Rule more than a decade ago, the goal was straightforward: ensure that individuals who are blind or visually impaired receive the same timely emergency information that appears visually during particular programming. But despite industry efforts over the years, that the rule has been in place, no automated or technically viable solution has emerged. As a result, that part of the rule has been waived repeatedly since its inception. Today's item tries to do something other than kick the can down the road. It looks at a common sense step forward, and it does so by looking at two important things. First, it ensures that people who are blind or visually impaired continue to receive the emergency information they rely on. Second, it eliminates a compliance obligation that can't be met because no technical solution exists. The record shows that the information conveyed through visual images is typically duplicative of the text crawls that are already provided orally. Removing an unworkable requirement therefore reduces unnecessary burdens while preserving access to essential information. I'm pleased that this item proposes a practical and balanced approach. It would ease compliance burdens, align our rules with technical realities, and ensure the continued availability of visual and non-textual emergency information. This is a type of regulatory modernization that strengthens the integrity and usefulness of our rules. So thank you to the video programming providers, distributors, consumer advocates, who all came together and contributed to the development of this proposal. And thanks, of course, to the talented FCC staff that worked on this item, including Virgie Ingram, Maria Malarkey, Diana Socolo, Hillary DeNigro, Alex Sangenis, Susie Rosen Singleton, Ike Ofabike, Stephen Wang, Susan Aaron, David Consul, Michelle Schaefer, Kim Mechuk, and Jocelyn James. Thank you all for the contributions. And with that, we'll proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trusty?
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. We've come to the end of the voting portion of today's agenda. Would any of my colleagues like to make any announcements at this? I'm going to slow it down so you can get ready. At this time,
Thank you. Yes,
starting,
yes.
Commissioner Gomez.
I do, in fact, have two announcements today, as my spring interns are sadly leaving. In fact, they're not here today because they are currently in finals, although hopefully they're able to watch remotely. First, it's Macarena Mac Villa Gomez Tapia will be graduating from the University of Colorado School of Law in Boulder next month. Mac has been a great addition to the team this semester, drafting statements and remarks, along with researching and analyzing complex legal issues that will serve us well in the coming months. Mac has plans to start her legal career in Denver, and I know with her legal skills, determination, and great attitude, she will achieve great things. Also leaving, but not quite as far, is Elizabeth Ellie Bailey. Ellie will soon be a rising third year at William and Mary School of Law. Ellie made significant contributions to our office this semester, drafting remarks, researching legal issues, and reviewing comments on critical legal issues before us. This summer, Ellie will be interning in the Wireline Competition Bureau's Telecommunications Access Policy Division, and I know that they will benefit from her strong analytical and writing skills. So thank you to you both.
Thanks. Commissioner, no announcements? First of all, our intern that we've had for a while now, Ryan Fenley's departure. Ryan, where are you at? You got to stand up. You got to go through the whole thing. So thank you so much to Ryan for all of his contributions during his time in our office. He's been a tremendous help. He's worked on transcribing interviews, reviewing and editing a range of documents, conducting a lot of research for us, compiling data. We're really, really grateful for all he's done. He brought a great attitude and hard work ethic to the building every day. We really appreciate that. And he's got some room for improvement on his March Madness picks. They call him Ryan the Basement Dweller when it comes to his March Madness picks. But beyond that, he did great. He did great. So thanks, yeah. 2 rounds of applause for you. Next up, this one saddens me. So Ben Arden, who was my chief of staff when I was a commissioner at the agency many moons ago, someone that we have worked very hard to incentivize to stay in the building many years past when he wanted to get out of here. Ben will be leaving the agency, so wanted to express my thanks and appreciation. He's been a close friend, trusted advisor, and after all these many years of service, he's leaving. Ben has been with the commission almost continuously since 2010, so he's got me beat by 2 years. He had a brief stint where he lived in Rwanda briefly. He spent most of his time in the agency in the Media Bureau in 4 years. He served as the chief of staff in my commissioner office. He's worked to shape a great deal, truly, of what we do inside this building. His judgment, his perspective have been invaluable, not just to me, but to so many people across this building. He's been a thoughtful advisor, great friend, exceptional public servant. His departure is a real loss for the commission, but we cannot say enough about how grateful we are for his long service here at the agency. And Ben, we wish you all the very best in the years ahead. So thank you for your service. All right, Madam Secretary, will you please announce the date of the next commission meeting?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Wednesday, May 20th, 2026.
Okay, until then, we stand adjourned.
All right, everyone, if you could please take your conversations outside. We'll be starting the chairman's press conference momentarily. All right. Every month I get them quieter, faster, and faster. So thank you, everyone, for joining our chairman's press conference. Since we have some new faces here, as a reminder, we're going to start questions on this side of the table and work our way down. And if you could just identify your outlet as well as your name and press the button to turn on your microphone to red, we will hear you. And thank you so much. And with that, I will hand it over to Chairman Brendan Carr.
Well, thank you for the smattering of applause. Yeah, that was a nice treat. So good to join all of you again today. It's been another busy, productive month at the FCC, including obviously the votes that we took right here, a number of really sort of core bread and butter actions for the agencies that we continue to push forward on satellite broadband, increased high-speed internet from space. Big vote today, obviously looking to increase capacity for space-delivered internet service by up to 7-fold. That's going to be a really big win for America's consumers and great for our country's technology leadership. Robocalls, obviously the biggest consumer complaint that we get. I get robocalls, you guys get them. We've been trying to take a slightly different approach here at the agency over the last year or so and changing our tactics. And you see that with some of our votes today. We're putting a bigger burden on voice service providers to know their customer, so we're not allowing bad actors to even get onto our network to originate these illegal calls in the first place. National security obviously took another important step forward on a number of those initiatives, so glad to see that. But it's been a good, productive time, and I think everyone had an eventful last couple of weeks. Who here made it to the White House Correspondents' Dinner? Do we have a number of folks here? Ended up being an eventful night, so I was really looking forward to Oz's performance as a mentalist, but at the end of the day, you know, I don't think he's that good of a mentalist. He didn't see that coming, so he really could have given us a heads up, perhaps. Really would have established his bona fides as a great mentalist, but that didn't happen. I also had the chance to get on the road, went down to North Carolina, spent some time with a tower crew up on top of another 2,000-foot broadcast tower. Like I said, when I started climbing these towers, it was about 7 years ago, so I'm now 7 years older. Every time I climb a tower, it's the oldest I've ever been climbing a tower, so it is increasingly challenging, but always gives me great respect for everything that the teams are doing, these construction crews. They do phenomenal work, and we're going to continue to deliver here. On our Build America agenda, we keep seeing downward pressure on prices, which is a good thing. In fact, AT&T just announced a new discounted program for low-income consumers. I think that's great news. We just got to continue to drive prices down, but we're really happy with the general direction that we're seeing there. So with that, happy to open it up and have you guys have your questions.
Hi, Chairman Carr. Chris Cole with Law 360. I just wanted to follow up on a petition that was filed last year, some former FCC officials concerning the news distortion policy. And I'm wondering if you plan to take any action on that. The petition was asking for a repeal, but do you want to do anything to clarify the agency's legal position in that area?
Well, the commission hasn't made a decision at this point on that petition. I think perhaps they're going to court there, so we'll talk to our Office of General Counsel about that. The FCC has a news distortion policy that's been in our case law books for a long, long time, and it's a policy that broadcasters are well aware of, and policies that aren't on our books are policies that we should enforce. But other than that, no news to break for you. We don't have a plan at this point to repeal that.
Is there any reason not to bring it to a vote?
Well, we get petitions all the time, and we work through them, and we make different decisions on what to do with them. But the policy itself has already been voted on by the commission over the years, and it's in our case law. So we got lots and lots of policies that we've already voted on at the agency over the years. So that's one of them.
Hi, Chairman Carr. Jericho Casper with Broadband Breakfast. So the high-cost modernization proposal that FCC is taking up next month floats the idea of including LEO satellites in the FCC's high-cost program for the first time. The Imperium asks whether locations covered by LEO satellite service should be removed from high-cost carrier service obligations and whether high-cost support is justified in areas where competitive alternatives already exist. So is that to say that you would consider taking high-cost support from small rural telephone providers in these areas to relocate to LEO providers? Or revoke
Very
support
neutrally
entirely,
balanced frame question. I like it.
or revoke support entirely in areas served where other federal funding has been committed? I'm just trying to clarify.
So look, we're obviously going to work through this proceeding and this issue, but the impetus here is this. We have a number of carriers that are in existing legacy support mechanisms that themselves are going to expire, are going to sunset at the end of this year. There's another set that end at the end of 2028. And so that's sort of now or soon is an appropriate time to look at, what's the future of these programs? How do we make sure that the communities that are being served through support from this program continue to be served with affordable, quality broadband? And the FCC over the years has looked, in some cases, high-speed internet. We've done it in RDOF. We've done it in other programs, so it's not something that's never been done before. And we're really open-minded here. There's no proposal here to do any sort of flash cut change. We are open to feedback. We're looking, in areas where there is lots of competition already. But again, these are legacy programs that haven't had a fresh look in a long time, and maybe we maintain it exactly the way it is. Maybe we increase support. It's just teeing up a range of questions based on the fact that these programs, without any FCC action, will sunset and stop. And so I think now is the right time to just be very reasonable, be sensitive to all of the stakeholders, be sensitive to the investments that are in here. And so, we're starting to have that conversation, but it's going to be a conversation over a long period of time.
Hi, Chairman Carr, Mira Bhakta with Broadband Breakfast. I know you've given a nod to this in the past, but can you give any further comment on whether or not you plan to approve the Amazon Leo acquisition of Globalstar? And do you believe that actions like this put Amazon Leo in the right place to reach the FCC's July satellite deadline?
Well, that recently announced deal doesn't relate to the deadline at the FCC. I'm not even sure if they filed at the FCC the paperwork yet for that transaction. What I will say is this. Going back many months, as we worked with my advisors and with our Space Bureau, one of the things that we set out was to make sure that the United States leads the world in next generation technologies. And one of those technologies may prove to be, you never know with technology, right? We have to have some humility about that. One thing that it may prove to be is direct-to-cell technology. So Americans today have long had these satellite dishes. Used to be big ones, now they're small ones, that you get connectivity from the satellite there, and you can hotspot off it or otherwise. We've long had satellite phones that are sort of clunky and not really doing significant data or broadband. And the idea with direct to sales, you can merge that, and right in your smartphone, you can get high-speed internet directly from a satellite. And we said from the get-go, we want the United States to be first out of the gate with that type of a technology. And so there's actions that have been brought to the FCC, for instance, on the spectrum side that we're doing to tee this up. There's regulatory reforms we're doing as well that can help do that. In fact, we're obviously taking steps today to help make it better, faster internet from space. And I think you want to have multiple players in that segment. So whether it ends up being Starlink and Amazon, AST Space Mobile is out there as well. I think you want to have 3 or more players in that market. Again, we'll see where it goes, but our overarching policy is to make sure that this agency is open-minded to the reforms and the actions needed to put the U.S. and U.S. businesses front and center in this new technology. So we're very open-minded on that deal, but we'll run it through our normal process.
Jeremy Barr from The Guardian. I'm surprised the ABC question lasted to me, but I'll
You want to know about Part 32 accounting rules, I'm sure.
I don't understand anything what she said. Just covered TV news. So obviously the timing of the order to bring the ABC licenses up for early renewal has raised questions coming a day after President and his wife, called for Jimmy Kimmel to be fired. I guess, do you see how people see that it might be connected to the Kimmel? I mean, let me just ask you this way. Was there any connection between the Kimmel comments last week, his ill-timed joke, and the early renewal request? And I guess, do you see that perception, and do you disagree with the notion that it's causation there?
Well, let me walk through the timeline, because I think that's part of what the confusion has been in some of the reporting that I've seen. You can go all the way back to more than a year ago, in March of last year, where I wrote a letter to Disney saying that there was evidence, and Disney has the opportunity, will continue to have the opportunity to put in counter evidence, but there was evidence or allegations indicating that Disney, through this sort of invidious form of DEI discrimination, was creating, as I specified in the letter to them, racially segregated spaces inside the company. There's other allegations that went to Disney forcing racial and identity quotas or preferences. And I said at the time that if that pans out, that's a big deal. We need to sort of end any form of discrimination based on race or protected class. It's in the very first portion of the Communications Act. Obviously, the Supreme Court, even just this week, reaffirmed it, that we can't be using race for preferences. And so we announced this investigation going all the way back to March. We said the Enforcement Bureau will be looking at it. I believe it was in June that we sent our first letter of inquiry to Disney on this topic, and they provided us, LOIs is our version of discovery or subpoenas effectively. They provided us with hundreds of documents at the time. And I've been consistent and very public. I tend, not to be shy speaking about these things publicly. And I've been saying for months that one thing that we're looking at in that investigation is an early renewal if that's where sort of the investigative steps tell us it needs to go. And I've said that publicly on multiple occasions going back weeks or months. Flash forward, we didn't think we got all the documents that we needed from Disney for our investigation. So we then issued a supplemental letter of inquiry, I think in February of this year. They had some period of time, 30 days or some period of time to respond. They asked for an extension of time of 30 days. And that extension of time ran until last week. And so last week, Disney provided the FCC with a second round of production, another couple hundred pages of documents that our team was looking at and is looking at. And there's a view that Disney was not forthcoming with the agency in terms of its document production last week. And we don't need to hash out, exactly why that is, but there is a concern that they weren't. And so after saying publicly for weeks and months that one next step in this investigation would be an early renewal, and we got the document production at the end of the last week that we thought Disney was hitting us up with the okey doke, we decided to take that next step. It also wasn't the first. We've been looking across the board at lots of different entities. So on Monday, we issued an early renewal for a station group owner called Bridge News. The staff recommendation to do that came out in the middle of last week. We moved forward with the Disney one on Tuesday, and I think there's going to be another one here soon on the radio side where we do a short renewal cycle as well. And so we've been very clear that we're holding broadcasters accountable to their obligations, not just public interest standards, but EEO obligations. The FCC has rules on the books. You can't discriminate based on race and gender, and there's evidence that had been submitted that that's what Disney was doing. And so that's the timeline of the agency's actions. I understand that anything that we do is now framed as in the wake of, in the headlines, and I understand that's how it is, but we got to make these decisions based on where we are in the investigations and what is best for next steps in that enforcement proceeding. And the headlines can be what the headlines are, but that was the basis for our decision.
I mean, the NAB said that the decision was nearly unprecedented, the request to do this early. I mean, do you agree?
There's a precedent from a day before, so it's fairly, recent precedent.
Right.
But
I mean, okay, I'm going to ask, sorry, one final quick question. So in February 2025.
Look, broadcasters, NAB is going to say what NAB is going to say. I get it. I guess Disney's a member of NAB, but, broadcasters are not all, with NAB on this. We had the National Religious Broadcasters that filed a petition with the FCC calling on the FCC to take action on Disney. So I think, broadcasters are not in a unanimous group here, and NAB knows very well that this was based on DEI conduct and not speech.
So the Comcast investigation into DEI began a month before the Disney one. Is NBC at risk of having their licenses come up for early renewal?
Well, it just depends on where the investigations go. I mean, we're going to be driven by the facts of each individual investigation. I don't have an update right now on where we are in that Comcast one, but we've been very consistent across the board about what we view as invidious forms of DEI discrimination. As deals have come before the FCC, we have required people to look at their policies and make sure they don't have what we think is invidious forms of DEI. Look, in ways, DEI is a tough concept because some people look at DEI and they view it as sort of just traditional non-discrimination. But there's other ways that you can do DEI policies that we view as the opposite of that, which is actually discrimination. So when you have debates over DEI, you can really be talking about two different things. When we talk about DEI, we talk about using protected characteristics, race and gender, to discriminate against people based on that. And so this idea that we care about invidious forms of DEI discrimination isn't new, isn't limited even to the broadcast segment. We've done it with Verizon's made commitments, Charter's made commitments, other broadcasters do it. We're doing it across the board.
Thanks.
Hi, Chairman.
Question, or did we let them go on too long? Okay.
Diego Munoz from Punchbowl. I want to ask you about something that's not related to ABC, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to respond to
You gotta choose one or the other. You
to
gotta
Senator
choose.
Cruz's comments about the ABC early renewal process, in which he said the FCC should not operate as a speech police. But my non-ABC question is, as I'm sure you know, the House Appropriations Committee included an amendment in the FSGG bill, which funds the FCC, to block the agency from reconfiguring, making any modifications to the 900 megahertz band. According to the appropriators, their intention is to block the next NAV petition. The FCC had notified OIRA that it was moving forward with a PNT rulemaking. I'm curious if the House Appropriations Committee's actions changes the calculus at all for the FCC moving forward on that rulemaking, and whether you're going to wait for the Hill to resolve this issue before the FCC moves forward with anything on PNT.
Well, on the first piece, look, I saw the Punchbowl headline, and I understand some of the incentive structures to use headlines or to try to drive wedges on issues, but I got to say, I don't think there's the daylight there that Punchbowl was indicated. I agree with Senator Cruz, Chairman Cruz, that the FCC should not operate as a speech police. What we have to do is we have these rules and regulations, these policies on our books, and we have to apply them. In this particular case, this action is driven by an investigation into DEI conduct, not any speech at all. And so I don't read as much daylight there as I think the Punch Bowl headline indicated. On the latter, we're always open to feedback and input from Congress. Anything that they pass, we will do. We have started a P&T rulemaking on NOI. As you indicated, we're consulting through the now longstanding OMB OIRA process. That process is still taking place, and until that process completes, there's no official position from us, and there's no final agency action. So we're just going to continue to work through the process and remain open-minded about different paths forward.
Just to clarify, since you said that I may be engaging in some type of yellow journalism or anything, I asked Senator Cruz to respond to the process.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very open question, and that was his response.
Yeah, like I said, I agree with Senator Cruz that the FCC shouldn't be in the business of being the speech police. What we have to do as an agency is to enforce our rules and regulations, and there are rules about non-discrimination that are unrelated to speech that we have been pushing across the board, and that's the basis for the early renewal in the Disney case. The New Bridge case, the early renewal there, also not about speech. It was about allegations or concerns about unauthorized transfers of control, and there's this other one on the radio side that we're looking at that has to do more generally with public interest obligations, and so we're going to focus on those issues.
Dave Sharbertson with Reuters. Just to follow the precedent, I want to ask one about ABC and one about the China actions you're taking today.
You can't do it. You just got to hold the hard line. But this is why I need my legal advisor Danielle here. She doesn't let people get away with this type of stuff.
I want to just want to drill down on the question.
Inside joke.
Did you get any pressure from the White House to take this action on Disney? Did you speak to President Trump? Did anyone at the White House direct you to do this? And I think one thing the critics have raised is that in November, when President Trump asked you and the commission to revoke Disney licenses after an ABC reporter asked a question in the Oval Office of the Saudi Crown Prince, that the following day you announced you were opening a new review of the agreements between the local broadcast groups and the national broadcasters. So was there any connection? Did you feel any pressure? Was the timing at all, as a result of White House pressure or what happened on Saturday night?
No, this was a decision that we made inside this building based on where we were in the enforcement matter. There was no pressure from the outside. There was no suggestion from the outside. There was no call for agency action from the outside. This was based on our assessment of where we were. And with respect to President Trump, obviously he has every right, First Amendment right, to express his position on this. One of the great things about President Trump is he's very transparent. He has told publicly his position. He has every right to make the decisions that he's made, to make the public calls that he's made. Same with the First Lady, and there's a lot of people out there that agree with them.
And can I ask on and then will the Jimmy Kimmel, will that all or any speech issues be part of this review? Is it solely restricted to DEI, the early license reviews?
Our DEI review is going to continue and is going to be part of that. We are calling their licenses in for early renewal. I think they have 8 station licenses. Once they make that filing, then anybody can file petitions to deny. We can't control what claims they make in their petitions to deny, and we'll take a look at all of that and we'll work through it, or if we don't have to work through it, we won't work through it, but we'll make the next decisions based on their filing, based on any petitions to deny that come in. But Disney, as part of the filing, is going to have to come in and demonstrate that they've been operating in the public interest, and the agency has a lot of case law out there that describes in detail what those public interest obligations are, and they're going to have to demonstrate that they've met their burden.
Just quickly on China, you've taken a number of actions in the last 3 weeks toward Chinese telecom. You said the commission is considering barring companies on the covered list since 2024 from being able to export equipment to the U.S. You're considering banning Chinese telecoms from operating data centers, points of presence. Can you just sort of speak broadly, not to mention the Chinese labs provision today. Can you talk broadly about what's motivating all these actions toward China? Is it about Salt Typhoon? Is there any sort of common thread to all these different actions?
Well, I would actually frame it slightly differently. I think our focus has been much more broad in terms of threats from foreign adversary nations, from bad actors abroad that aren't even nation-state actors. And we specifically stood up a Council on National Security. And one of the good things is when you stand something up like that, It's going to be an active group. We've got a very hard-charging, active group that is running point on our national security things. So again, we take actions, for instance, on drones. We prohibited all drones produced in foreign countries originally, whether it's Europe or anywhere. On routers, same thing. It was about foreign-produced routers, again, almost regardless of where it is. And then we'll go through and create exceptions as necessary on a case-by-case basis. But I would view it more as national security as a general matter. And there's always a component here, too, of when you take action to have bad actors out, that creates opportunity for domestic onshoring as well. So I would frame it more through that broader perspective rather than narrowly a country-specific basis for our actions.
Is it okay if I go now, Dave?
So, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Monty Taylor, Com Daily. You brought up the NRB complaint. That definitely was about what Kimmel said. Do you see?
I didn't file it. NRB filed
You brought it up just now, though. and so I was wondering, do you see merit in that complaint? Is that something the FCC would pursue? The NRB's complaint that his speech was inciting violence, and also, to pull a Shepardson, you said that the investigation is all about diversity. Doesn't the FCC have a bunch of
discrimination?
Discrimination, excuse me. Doesn't the FCC have a bunch of rules on the book requiring companies to take diversity measures? The EEO rules, those are still in place. And where's the line between?
Yeah, I mean, again, this goes back a little bit to what I was saying about how do you look at DEI? Which perspective do you look at it through? But our EEO rules, in my view, do not promote or require or even allow invidious forms of discrimination. And with respect to your question about NAB, all I'm saying is they filed a petition. I honestly haven't read it all the way through, but we're going to treat it the way we treat any petition or document that we get.
Do you plan to? Are the EEO rules going to be a target of the delete proceeding?
If we need to update them, then we'll take a look at updating. That's possible.
Okay, I'll be done now.
Stay tuned.
Hi, Leon Island from Bloomberg. I'd like to ask a question the DC Circuit asked you this week. When are you guys going to take action on the Media Bureau's order in Nexstar Tegna?
Seems like the same question we got from the D.C. Circuit. So we will respond to the D.C. Circuit. They gave us till May 11th to provide a response on the status of the applications for review, and stay tuned to the May 11th FCC filing to see what we say there. As obviously pleased to see that the court generally denied the request for interlocutory appeal. Obviously, it's sort of very rare and exceptional circumstances where that would happen. So I was pleased with the general disposition of it, and we're happy to provide the court with an update on May 11th in our filing. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Chairman. Nancy Skull, I'm writing for Washingtonian Magazine.
I've
Do
heard
you
about
think
that,
your thinking on the public interest obligation and the FCC's application of it has evolved over the years, or has it remained constant throughout your career?
Well, I guess you could say there's my view, there's FCC case law, there's what other FCC leaders have done over the years, and you can have debates about where there's daylight between those things. I think my position from the get-go has been very clear, which is I think the FCC has rules on the books that we're supposed to enforce, and I think that there have been agency leaders here over the last number of years that simply haven't done that. But I actually think that the agency itself has been clear about what the public interest standard is. If you go back, the entire model that the agency uses for the public interest standard is what we refer to as a public trustee model. And so broadcast, I think more people are actually getting this. Broadcast is fundamentally different than cable or streaming or newspaper or soapbox on the street. And the reason is this: you can have unlimited numbers of, effectively streaming services, and today almost unlimited cable and unlimited soapboxes and newspaper. There's no interference or conflict between them. So you don't need, a government to pick a winner or a loser or to license them. Broadcast, by its very nature, is different. You have to give somebody a monopoly on a particular set of frequencies, because if you're not, it's, as an old FCC case say, it's like the Kilkenny cats. You can't hear each other because of the interference. And so because the government has to pick a winner, give someone a monopoly on that microphone and license them, the next question is, well, what happens to the community member that was denied the ability by the government to use it as a microphone? And one option is to say, tough luck, it's like cable. They can do whatever they want, say whatever they want. It's like a soapbox, it's like a newspaper. But that's not what Congress and the FCC decided. What they said was, no, we want a public trustee model. So yeah, you won you got this for free. You can exclude others. You have a monopoly on this, but you need to nonetheless account for the entire community in terms of delivering your public interest obligation. You're supposed to assess the needs of the community. That's what localism is in our rule, and deliver it. Again, there was a fork in the road where we could have said, you won, be like a cable channel, be like a newspaper, do whatever you want. But they said no, because you got it for free, you got a monopoly, you got a license, you're standing not just in your shoes, but you're standing out for the interests of the whole community. And we've been very clear about that over the years in the Supreme Court. It's gone all the way to the Supreme Court. And they've said that holding broadcasters to their public interest obligations isn't censorship. It isn't a violation of their First Amendment because of that analysis, that mode of First Amendment analysis that applies uniquely in that monopoly. So we can't step back the way you step back in cable or streaming or newspaper because of that physical reality of interference. I think it's less about, people focus on scarcity. I think it's less about scarcity. It's more about you have to exclude someone, the government does, otherwise there'd be interference.
So just
And I
as a
think
quick
we've
follow-up,
said that pretty clearly. But if we need to compile some of those case laws together and put it together in a single document, I don't know, call it a public interest, public notice, then maybe we'll do that.
So just for clarity, there's some measure of chairman's discretion, commission discretion involved there. As a young telecom lawyer, you would look at your chairmanship and say, okay, that's the proper amount of applying the
Well,
public
I'd say
interest obligations.
we're looking at the case law, whether it's, 50s, 60s, 70s case law or otherwise. This is what the FCC has said, and we're reminding you that this is what the FCC has said. And I don't think it's making it up or not making it up. It's, did someone else look the other way? Maybe, I don't know. But I'm not looking somewhere new. I'm looking to the actual decisions of the FCC and saying, we've said this, we've said it, like we were serious, we're not just going to look the other way. Because again, I think part of the dynamic that's happened here at the agency is you see the rise of the internet, you see the rise of social media, you see the rise of cable, and you say, okay, let's eliminate all these regulations of broadcast and treat them just like cable. But it's not. It's technically not that way. The law doesn't allow us. And if Congress wants to come together and the president and change it and say we want broadcast to be like, again, I think there's a technical problem because of the nature of interference on spectrum that isn't present in those other places. But if Congress wants to deregulate it because of all of these, they can. But as of right now, it's just different technically and legally.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I never thought I'd get such a long explanation of, broadcast public interest.
That was educational. Thank you.
If you need to take a nap today, just rewind 10 minutes.
This is enlivening.
No
Thank
need
you.
for melatonin.
So, one thing, Chairman, you said was that the president is entitled to his opinion on the networks. Do you agree with his point of view? Are you concerned about what you're seeing in terms of content?
But again, it's not just
Kimball's
the
comments?
president. You've got many
I guess
members of
I'm asking
Congress
specifically about the president, though.
who have
Like, if you
expressed
could
this view.
focus on
The
that. Yeah.
First Lady has expressed her view. The president
Yeah.
has expressed his view. I think over time here, you've heard me speak to these issues a lot. There's a lot of people that agree with the president on this one.
Including yourself.
There's a lot of people.
There's a lot of people, including yourself. So it sounds to me, please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm summarizing, that the timing was coincidental, it sounds like what you're saying, in terms of the announcement of the early review, or would you disagree with that?
Well, again, we walked through the timeline very clearly, the idea of the investigation, where it was going, very publicly saying that this is probably going to be a next step depending on how the production goes. The production came in last week. We took a look at it. It felt to us like they were playing rope-a-dope and weren't being entirely forthcoming with the production. They're going to disagree with that, I'm sure, and they get the right to, and they can say that.
And I'm sorry, on that point, is it that they didn't produce the documents fully or on time, or what specifically was the problem?
There was an original production deadline. They said, hey, this is like a big request. We got to get a lot of documents together. Can you give us another 30 days? And so we said, sure. And that 30 days ran last week. If they produced the documents on the original deadline, I don't think we'd be in the same temporal moment as we are right now. And they actually produced fewer documents the second round, even though it was a bigger request, than they did in the first round. And they, in our view, artificially narrowed the search that they did that's not consistent with the LOI that we sent them. Again, maybe it's an issue where lawyers disagree, and we'll see what they say on that. But our initial assessment was we don't think that they were entirely forthcoming in that production. And so I said, look, I can't use a bad word, we can't mess around on this. It's an important issue. It's discrimination. Let's move to the next phase. And so maybe they'll take it more seriously at this point.
And just my final thought or question is, you're really good at the process, and being a telecom lawyer for so long, like you know it really well. Can you step back for a second and talk about, which is great, I appreciate that. My question is more about perhaps a precedent you might be setting. And when I talked to telecommunications lawyer, they said they haven't heard of an early review sort of action like this in decades.
Not in a day, but yes.
Or yesterday, which was also great timing.
Yeah.
And then, how do you feel about that? Like, and what this reflects on you and your chairmanship in terms of doing something that's pretty aggressive?
Well, look, I think to some level, the characterization of this being a commission that is doing new, different, aggressive things is a mindset that you see across every single vertical in this building. I understand the media focuses on the media portion, but look what we're doing with the Space Bureau. We're fundamentally transforming that place to operate much more in assembly line fashion to go quicker. We're taking an old rule that people felt bound by and saying, no, we're not going to feel bound by that. Let's increase capacity 7x. Well, Europe might not like it. Okay, we don't care, on this particular one, apparently. Robocalls, we've done it this way. No, let's rethink this and attack it at every portion of the life cycle. Copper retirement. You had Chairman Pai, who was, had a fairly aggressive deregulatory agenda, but they only went so far. And we're like, let's go further than that. And so I think it's the energy that we bring across every single docket. And yeah, you guys see it in the media space, but that's the agenda that we're running. It's pretty hard charging, it's pretty aggressive. I've been here since 2012, back when I actually had hair. I have an idea of what we want to get done. And in government, time is the most important thing. And so we're moving aggressively and quickly across the board.
And success would look like what in terms of your media orders? What would that look like?
Success what?
What would success look like for you after all of this is done, these reviews, et cetera?
Well, look, one, if you're asking about, how people are going to describe the chairmanship and everything, I have no idea. I mean, the New York Times has already written my obituary. It doesn't look good. I can't really do anything to improve that or hurt it at this point, so I'm not really that bothered by it. We just keep charging ahead. When you've been in these jobs, you live through a lot of news cycle, and you start to realize the irrelevancy of it to what really matters. We went through the great net neutrality repeal of 2017. CNN, banner level headline, end of the internet as we know it. But going through that, you knew, all right, I got my North Star as a regulatory matter. I know we're right on this one. I know we're going to get killed short term. But flash forward to today, internet speeds are up, more competition. Europe, which had their version of net neutrality, is just getting left behind in terms of investment and speeds. And so you live through that experience and you say, okay, I got my regulatory North Star. We've got the record. We've got the law. You motivate the people and you go forward. And you have to just ignore the headlines. I mean, you can't let the New York Times, dictate how you're going to do your job. I got more New York Times stories,
I don't
but
want to dictate your
I'll
job.
stop there.
Thank you.
That's all right. I got fired up in the New York Times over the weekend, so. You want to hear about that?
You go.
No, it's okay. I tweeted it. It's fine. All right. That was a lot of fun for me, at least. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm now going to hand it over to my colleague, Will Whitequist, who will run the Bureau press conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we're going to do the Bureau press conference as usual. We're going to go through the items on the agenda. If you have any questions on those items, we'll call up the bureaus and offices to take those questions. So first off, Space Bureau satellite spectrum sharing. Monty? I mean, you're complaining earlier, Monty, that you weren't getting enough attention. This is your whole thing now. Jay?
Let me guess.
You can guess.
All right.
Monty Taylor, Com Daily. I was just wondering if you could tell us about any changes to the item from the draft version.
Sure. So there was pretty active ex parte activity after we released the original draft. And in response to those ex partes and requests from commissioners, we did make a number of edits, particularly I'd say related to how do we finalize the final number of reference links that will be used, and then a little bit more color or clarification on how the compatibility studies will be done once those reference links are not locked down. Okay, you bet.
Any other questions on this item?
Okay.
Next up is Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau Robocall Know Your Customer. Monty, go ahead. Chief.
I was just hoping you could tell me about any changes from the draft version.
Sure. Similar to the space item, there was a pretty active record on this as well. I think you guys did a nice article summarizing some of that. A few things did change, and you'll see this when the item's released, but it focused on some of the enforcement requirements, flexibility and requirements, or maybe a possible more questions around the risk-tiered approach for smaller providers. Use of AI tools as an effort, or other types of analytics tools, and some additional questions around using the data to better assist law enforcement, because we had that sort of criminal other use cases as opposed to just illegal calls to the item. So, sure.
Any other questions on this? Thank you all. Next up, Office of Engineering and Technology. Monty, you want Test Lab Reciprocity? So OET, if you can join us. Thank you.
Yeah, just the changes from the draft version.
We had very little changes from the draft. We had some questions from the Gomez office for around citations and adding some examples. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you all. Next up, the Wireline Bureau. We're going to do both items together. I assume you have a question. Joseph? So this is the Section 214 covered list item and the E-rate competitive bidding item. We're going to do those together. So if anyone has any questions on either item.
Monty?
I have my usual questions about both. I am also, Commissioner Gomez mentioned a bunch of changes to the E-rate item, so I guess I'd hope you talk about those a little bit.
Sure. Well, of course, leave it to Commissioner Gomez to speak about her additions that she did get into the item. On the 214 item, as the chairman mentioned, Commissioner Trustee had some edits regarding Part 15 rules and use of unlicensed spectrum. We also seek comment on or ask more questions about the team telecom process. On E-rate, just generally, we're directing USAC now to provide more training to applicants and more testing for them to become more familiar with the system, while also explaining that it will be part of the existing E-rate portal or an application system, which should hopefully reduce burdens on applicants. Yep.
Any other questions on this? Thank you all. And last but certainly not least, Media Bureau Audible Call. Monty? Bureau?
Hi, Hillary.
Hi, Monty.
Were there any changes from the draft version? I didn't think anybody came in on this one after it was issued. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, there are a couple of tweaks in the footnotes to add ex partes that came in and a clarification, but they're small.
Anything else on this? Okay, thank you all. Thanks. Great. And with that, I will hand it off to Commissioner Gomez. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Make myself some room here. Let's see. It's afternoon now, so good afternoon. This week, we saw one of the most egregious assaults on the First Amendment by this FCC to date. The White House called publicly for the silencing of a vocal critic, and the FCC answered the call. The agency's Media Bureau directed Disney's 8 ABC-owned stations to file early license renewals ahead of schedule, some of which are nearly 5 years before they would otherwise come due. Calling an early renewal of a broadcast license is a rare step. It happens only as a last resort and after evidence of clear abuse of the trust surrounding that license or a blatant violation of our rules. It has not happened in decades, and the targeting of a group of stations to punish a parent company has never happened in history. The irony is not lost on anyone. A joke made about an event meant to honor the First Amendment is now being used as a justification to curtail it. Now, you've heard me talk about how this administration is engaged in a campaign of censorship and control. So I want to take a moment to highlight what others have said, because this is not just my view. Senator Ted Cruz said in response to what the FCC did, "It is not the government's job to censor speech, and I do not believe the FCC should operate as a speech police." Republican Congressman James Comer, chair of the House Oversight Committee, said, "I don't want to cancel comedy. I believe in freedom of speech." He, Kimmel, has a right to do that. And the viewers, if they don't like it, they can turn the channel. Conservative radio host Glenn Beck, whose syndicated show airs across more than 400 stations across the country, said, "The government should stay completely out of this controversy." And the National Association of Broadcasters put it plainly. The FCC's request is nearly unprecedented, runs contrary to the principles of predictability and fairness that Congress established, and creates significant uncertainty for broadcasters who are already working hard to deliver trusted journalism and life-saving emergency services to their communities. For all the talk from this FCC about serving the public interest of local communities, this action has nothing to do with local communities. It is a direct response to a national political incident and a White House directive. Sadly, it will be the local stations caught in the middle of this political vendetta that will pay the price. And the double standard here is glaring. The FCC is targeting Disney while staying completely silent about talk, radio, and television stations that are friendly to this administration but operate under the exact same rules. Ultimately, I welcome this fight, and so should Disney. For months, we have been watching this FCC try to reshape the media landscape in this administration's favor, and for months it has failed. It failed to get Jimmy Kimmel off the air for the first time. The public outcry from local communities was so loud the agency had to back down. It failed to intimidate Stephen Colbert. When FCC pressure led to CBS questioning whether to air his interview with a Senate candidate, Colbert put it on YouTube anyway, where it has been seen by more than 8 million people. The FCC's intimidation tactics backfired spectacularly. It has failed so far to impose the Nexstar-Tegna mega merger on local communities, a deal that would decimate local coverage and far exceeded the national ownership cap Congress wrote into the law. It failed to destroy public media, launching investigations into NPR and PBS to drive them off the public airwaves. Thankfully, private donors and foundations have stepped up, and despite losing federal funding, stations are still on the air and still serving their communities. No matter how hard this FCC has tried, it has failed to reshape the media to be more favorable to this administration, and this effort against Disney will be no different. First, Disney's stations will keep their licenses while this drags on through years of litigation. And secondly, Disney has been here before. When the state of Florida came after them, they fought back and prevailed. More companies should show courage and follow Disney's lead, because this should be a lesson to every media company watching. Capitulation does not mean protection. This administration will keep coming back, demanding more. The only answer is to stand up, fight back, and defend the First Amendment. This is the moment when media companies must decide whether they will defend press freedom or surrender it. Disney has chosen to fight. I am confident they will win. Thank you. Monty?
How do you know Disney has chosen to fight? They've settled with this administration before. They're cooperating with the FCC. Have they told you that they're going to be pushing back on this?
It has been reported that they have said that they will fight.
But they haven't come to you and said that.
I have seen reporting.
Okay,
All the way up through the new
Just wondered-
CEO.
I don't know. And then, what do you respond to the chairman saying that this has nothing to do with speech? It is true that he has been long mentioning early renewals, going after Disney's DEI programs. He has said that for a long time. What's your response to him saying these aren't connected?
This is clearly a pretext. I mean, give me a break. This is just another part of the pattern of harassment and retaliation in order to bend Disney to this administration's will.
Dave Shepardson from Reuters. Can I ask you, assume for the moment that what Chairman Carr said is accurate, that Disney's diversity practices were either in violation of the commission rules or in, EEOC regulations, just for the moment. Would that be sufficient grounds, do you think, to revoke Disney's broadcast licenses?
So to be clear, what the FCC is doing is it is advancing the renewal process for all 8 stations. And as I noted, some of those stations aren't up till 2031. And it's very extraordinary. And the what the commission would have to do to pass judicial scrutiny would be extraordinary. There is no case here. And in the end, this is why I'm heartened that Disney's going to fight this, because they will win.
And what sort of precedent do you think this might set, right? If it would, do you think could a future Democratic administration opt to then sort of maybe take similar actions against, because you said conservative radio stations or others that they disagreed with the content on the air?
I think it's very important to just focus on the fact that this is unconstitutional. It is unprecedented. It is unlawful, and it's unlawful no matter who is in power to take these types of actions against broadcasters. We are prohibited by the Communications Act from censoring broadcasters. We are prohibited by the First Amendment from government censorship of the press or of speech. So we need to defend that because we need to defend that for our democracy.
Just lastly, do you think the Jimmy Kimmel joke made before the dinner on Saturday? Do you think is there any reasonable interpretation that could meet either the news distortion or broadcast hoax standard that would put it in violation of the public interest standard?
No. It's so insane. Just because we have words, news distortion and hoax, doesn't mean that they apply by any measure here. It is just a legal justification to shut down a vocal critic.
Jeremy Barr from The Guardian.
And I should say, by the way, not good legal justification.
I mean, have you made your concerns known to the Enforcement Bureau or the chairman? I know that you released this statement, but Chairman Carr certainly was not acknowledging any connection between, it happened a day after the calls for him to be fired, but I guess what avenues do you have, and have you kind of made it known behind the scenes as well that you disagree with this and the precedent it sets?
I think I've been so vocal that I don't need to do anything behind the scenes. I don't like talking about my conversations with the chairman, so.
Yeah. Well, are you worried, the Comcast investigation was opened a month before the Disney one. Are you worried that this might happen to NBC as well?
I don't have any insight into where that stands. What's clear to me is that this action is also meant to warn others that they could be subject to similar action. Again, it's unlawful, unprecedented, and doomed to fail, which is why people need to push back.
Last one, sorry. How long do you think this whole process could theoretically take? I mean, if they have until May 28th to apply, how long do you think this could be drawn out for with all the different steps of the process?
I don't have a specific time scale, as you note, it's a multi-step process. It depends on whether the commission decides that it wants to actually move forward with non-renewal of broadcast licenses. That is a public process, and then there's the designation process. That goes through its process. Then there's an opportunity for review by the commission. Then, of course, there's appeal. This could go years. And as I said, in the meantime, Disney can continue operating its local stations. Thanks.
Hi, Commissioner Chris Cole with Law 360. I just wanted to ask, going back to news distortion, the petition that was filed last fall to repeal that policy. Do you have any insights as to whether the commission is ever going to be able to vote on that, or what's going on with it internally?
I don't. As you know, the chair sets the agenda for the agency and directs the staff on what to do. The commission should act on that. What we are seeing is an abuse of precedent and also an absolute misrepresentation of precedent in order to go after content that's disfavored. And so that's very dangerous.
In your view, is a writ of mandamus going to be required from the D.C. Circuit to compel the agency to act on that petition?
I would ask
because that's what the
petitioners that question.
Yeah. But do you support that, having such a court order?
It's incumbent on this commission to respond to that petition.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Hi, Commissioner Gomez. Jericho
Hey.
Casper with Broadband Breakfast. Sorry to divert your attention from the very important First Amendment issues, but I have a question about a proposal that you're taking up next month on the broadband data collection.
Oh, God.
Oh, gosh. No, sorry. The proposal would eliminate requirements for providers to submit what it calls grandfathered metrics, including fixed broadband availability data and 3G mobile data. It would eliminate requirements that providers be notified of fabric challenges and have the opportunity to respond to them. And I'm just curious if you have a first reaction to the proposal.
It's too soon.
Okay.
I need to review it.
Very fair. Okay.
Sorry.
That's fair.
We can follow up.
Sounds great.
Mira Bhakta with Broadband Breakfast. In a NTCA discussion earlier this week, you outlined wanting to bolster and expand FCC subsidy programs like Lifeline. Given recent FCC moves that target fraud in many of these subsidies, do you or the Commission worry at all that reducing eligibility or expanding regulatory guidelines, like the introduction of the E-rate bidding portal today, for many of these programs that are aimed at providing connectivity for low-income consumers, in the effort of preventing fraud for Lifeline and other programs in the USF will hurt low-income consumers in the process?
Yes, I'm very concerned about actions this agency is taking to make it harder for the beneficiaries of these programs to apply for and to continue to be eligible for these benefits. Lifeline is actually undersubscribed. There are a lot more eligible households that could be utilizing Lifeline, but don't. And rather than making it harder for consumers and for eligible consumers to actually use the service, we should be making it easier for them. I agree with targeting fraud. We should be going after the companies that perpetrate that fraud. We shouldn't be making it harder for eligible subscribers to utilize the service. Why? Because connectivity is crucial to success in today's society. And as we move just at lightning speed towards AI and the AI economy, those communities that can't afford connectivity are just going to continue to be left further and further behind.
Commissioner Nancy Squilla, running for Washingtonia Magazine. I'm struck by some of the language that you've used today and in the past about the chairman and the commission saying they've failed in some of their investigations and threats. I think in the past you talked about it being a paper tiger, like the commission is a paper tiger at this point. It's somewhat different from some of the rhetoric that other critics of the chairman have used, where it's, he's a threat to the First Amendment. We should be afraid of him. Do you worry at all about the sort of mixed messaging there, or it backfiring, that people start to think, okay, I don't have to worry about this commission or this person because the Commissioner Gomez told me not to ignore him, told me to ignore him?
I have been very clear that everyone needs to speak up about the actions of this administration against the First Amendment. That is a threat to our democracy. What I am saying is that what this FCC is doing is bound to fail. So those are two very different things.
So it's know that they'll bring an investigation, nothing's going to happen, is sort of the argument you're making to corporate entities mostly, right? Is that the
Yeah, we need the corporate parents of these broadcasters to stand up for our First Amendment and to push back. And that is why I am so heartened that that is what Disney's doing. We need to take this to the fruition, which is finally the FCC being rebuked by judicial review for the actions that it has been taking against the First Amendment.
So when you call the agency a paper tiger, the audience for that, yeah, it's more of a corporate audience than like the general public worried about Jimmy Kimmel or whatever it might be.
Sure.
Okay.
I think it's incumbent on all of us to stand up for the First Amendment because it's our democracy that we have to protect. Monty?
Monty Taylor, Com Daily. First of all, on the E-rate thing, you talked about some changes that you asked them to make to the portal. Can you be more specific about what you wanted and what you got or what you didn't get?
Sure. We got that the portal will be integrated as a new module in the EPC rather than built as a standalone platform. And that the documentation uploaded to the portal satisfies the participants' 10-year record-keeping obligations. We got clearer guidance on how the federal portal and existing state procurement processes will work together, with USAC directed to provide specific training and outreach on coordination. We got commitments around training, testing, and stakeholder feedback added before the portal goes fully live. We got that applicants may hold meetings or conferences with interested bidders so long as new questions and answers relevant to the competitive bidding process are posted to the portal no later than 72 hours after the after the meeting. What we didn't get was the conversion of the live bidding portal to a simpler document repository, which is what the IG recommended, and a one-year extension of the implementation deadline to FY 2029.
And then I got a question from the illustrious Howard Buzzkirk. Are you concerned about the potential effect of the FCC's foreign router ban on the ongoing deployment of the latest generation of Wi-Fi, or that the approval orders so far lack specificity on why the companies were cleared or commitments to make their routers more secure? I don't know if I said that right, but that's what he wrote. Did that make sense?
Yes, it did.
Okay, great.
I'm very concerned about the actions that this FCC is taking on putting items on the covered list for reasons other than national security, and what the ultimate effect on consumers is going to be. You know, the routers one in particular is worrisome because we really don't have that many domestically made routers, certainly not in the consumer space. And I also worry about the fact that we are, taking it upon ourselves to do what is essentially industrial policy here. So that's my answer to Howard. Tell him I said hi.
Hopefully he heard it.
Okay. Thanks, guys.